on those two alone at this stage. Kia ora.
Mr Chair.
The Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Chair, I just wanted to take the opportunity to answer some common questions that have been raised by the first three speakers. And perhaps just to clarify the difference between the national education and learning priorities and the objectives. First of all, the objectives are enduring, and the NELP provides a medium-term set of priorities that are directed to achieving those objectives. In respect of whether issues of equity or commitment to lifelong learning should be made explicit, it's my view that the objectives speak to each of those themes, but in different ways. And so in terms of in terms of equity, Objective 1 focuses on helping each child and young person to achieve their educational aspirations and the best of their potential. Objective 2 already expects the education system to develop in each child their abilities, their attributes, their social skills, to form relationships, participate in community life and resilience. Objective 4 is certainly about kids leaving the system prepared for the world of work, which is a very big part of adult life. The question has also been asked both by Mr Hipkins and Ms Delahunty and Ms Martin, why 5 years? I don't think there is a perfect timeline, but what we do know is that the current National Administration Guidelines and the National Education Guidelines have no time horizon. They go on and on. We wanted a 5-year period that was not matched to a political cycle. We wanted one that was sufficiently medium term and responded to the sector's own consistent aspiration for there to be greater predictability, certainty, stability in what was being required of them at a high level, and that's why the 5 years has been settled upon. As I said, coming to some members have also said, why doesn't the NELP and why don't the objectives simply follow the curriculum? And the answer there is because the curriculum is separate and distinct, and it does, and there actually were quite significant concerns that we didn't simply appropriate the curriculum into legislation, but that we complemented it by the high-level statement. So it isn't one or the other, it's how they speak and cross-reference to each other to create a context within which the sector operates. There have been concerns about consultation. What's set out in the bill is the minimum. It is the minimum. Members will know that in the articulation of both the NEGs and the NAGs, no consultation has been required. We are saying that there is a minimum of consultation. The time we live in now is that there is high expectation that consultation will occur. And Ms Martin questioned why no explicit provision for business, for instance. Well, we have now established a national cross-sector forum, which not only has business present, but it has Pacific Island churches, iwi leader forums, it has mayors, it has police district commanders. That meets 3 to 4 times a year, and then we have 40 regional cross-sector forums. So we have put in place actual mechanisms that do require consultation beyond simply education. In terms of preparation of the legislation, officials are reflecting over a 2-year period of different kinds of consultation that we have had with the sector, and then specifically through November and December of 2015, submissions, over 1,800 of those, were received from the sector and from the public, and those included submissions from children. Members were concerned about children's voices. Well, first of all, we did get submissions on those. Second of all, every Board of Trustees is required to have a student voice on it. Thirdly, I actively invited all schools to consider running inquiries within their schools an inquiry approach to studying this piece of this bill and legislation and considering making submissions to Select Committee, which of course the committee was free to do also.
I call Dennis Lisa.